discussed previously, carbohydrates, proteins, and fats are your macronutrients. Vitamins are a micronutrient. And then we have water, which is also considered a macronutrient, but does not supply energy. So the final nutrient that we want to talk about are minerals. Minerals are inorganic elements, so they do not contain carbon or hydrogen. They're involved in structure and regulation. Minerals can be found in both plants and in animal sources and are divided into two categories. They can be either major minerals, where we need them in amounts greater than 100 milligrams per day, or trace minerals, where we need them in amounts less than 100 milligrams per day. And many of our foods supply the minerals. The ability, though, of our body to absorb them is extremely important because we may be taking them in, but if we're not able to absorb them, then we're not getting the benefit of that mineral. So the bioavailability, or the ability to absorb, and the degree to which those minerals are absorbed, is extremely important. And bioavailability can be impacted in various ways. This screen gives you a general overview of that. One of the ways is the mineral source. Is it a plant versus an animal source? Minerals from animal products are better absorbed than those minerals that come from plant products. Sometimes there are things that are in the soil or in the plant product itself that actually inhibit the absorption of certain minerals. Fiber-mineral interactions are important. Phytic acid, or phytate, which is found in grains, it's a grain fiber, can bind to the mineral and actually cause interference with that absorption. Mineral-mineral interactions we need to look at. Minerals such as magnesium, iron, copper, and calcium are all very similar in terms of their size, and they all have the same charge. So if we are taking in an excess in one mineral, it might result in a decreased absorption of another mineral as they compete for the absorption. So for example, if you have a patient who is taking a calcium supplement and an iron supplement, you want to make sure they're not taking those supplements at the same time. And a lot of times patients, they have their pills, and they're told to take something once a day, and they think, well, it's just easiest if I just take everything at once. So they take a handful of pills at once. But you as a nurse, the physician, and the pharmacist need to make sure you're letting the patients know there may be some interactions that occur, and it might be better to take one in the morning and one in the evening. And then you can also have vitamin-mineral interactions. Unlike the other three, though, the vitamin-mineral interaction is actually necessary for nutrient absorption and metabolism. For example, iron absorption increases when consumed with a good source of vitamin C. So we do have some positive vitamin-mineral interactions that occur. Now let's look at some of the major minerals. Sodium is considered a major mineral, and it's better known as table salt. It's important for fluid balance and nerve transmission. And really, our human body absorbs almost all of the sodium that we ingest. So a deficiency in the United States is extremely rare. We have sodium that we get naturally in foods, but we get a lot of sodium through our processed foods, convenience foods, restaurant foods. Those are all very high in sodium and provide about 80% of our sodium intake. Then if we add salt in cooking, that provides another 10%, as well as the salt that naturally occurs in the food. Current guidelines state that we need 2,300 milligrams daily. So that's 1 teaspoon of salt. Think about that. What does 1 teaspoon of salt look like? Unfortunately, most of us consume anywhere from 2,300 to 4,700 milligrams of sodium a day. So it's recommended that we follow the DASH diet. DASH stands for Dietary Approach to Stop Hypertension. In this case, the focus is on lots of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and low-fat, fat-free dairy products, staying away from processed foods and a lot of restaurant foods. If you eat that way, you naturally lower your sodium intake. A second major mineral that we're looking at is potassium. Potassium is important for nerve impulse transmissions as well as muscle contractions. Unprocessed foods, fruits and vegetables, whole grains, and low-fat dairy products are extremely high in potassium. However, unlike sodium in the United States, our intake of potassium is fairly low. So one of the goals we want to do is we want to encourage people to increase their potassium intake, and that will naturally help to lower high blood pressure. Chloride is a third major mineral, and chloride is important for extracellular fluid control as well as for immune function. The largest contributor of chloride you find in salt, sodium chloride. And again, overconsumption usually occurs because of the amount of salt that we take in daily. Another major mineral is calcium. Calcium is important for our teeth, our bones, for nerve transmission, and for muscle contraction. Calcium, we need approximately 1,000 to 1,200 milligrams daily. And we want to make sure that that calcium is being absorbed. So parathyroid hormone helps to enhance the absorption of that calcium. But there are also some things that inhibit calcium absorption. Large amounts of phytic acid, which we find in grain products, excess amounts of phosphorus in the diet, a vitamin D deficiency, diarrhea, aging, all inhibit our phosphorus absorption. We do want to make sure, though, that we're getting excess calcium, because if the calcium is low, we can have issues with something called tetany. And tetany is what happens to the muscles. They start to jump. Maybe you've had restless leg syndrome when you're sleeping, you're trying to go to bed, or maybe sleeping in the middle of the night, you wake up and your legs are very restless. You feel like your muscles are constantly moving. That can be an example of what tetany feels like. And oftentimes that's a result of low calcium intake or a calcium deficiency. Phosphorus. Phosphorus is important for bone structure, and it's a component of ATP, DNA, and RNA. And it's recommended that we take in about 1,000 milligrams daily. Again, we don't have any problems getting phosphorus in our diet because it's used as an additive. It's found in a lot of processed foods, packaged goods, baked goods, as well as processed restaurant-type foods. So for the majority of the population, phosphorus is not a problem to get. And then magnesium. Magnesium is important for ATP, DNA, and RNA synthesis. Magnesium is located throughout the body, but the majority of it is found in bone. And a deficiency could result in irregular heartbeats, weakness, muscle pain, and seizures. So those are the major minerals that we need to be aware of. The next thing we're going to look at our trace minerals.